My name is Keng. I'm from Architecture and Sustainable Design. And
Yeah, my name is Jooyoung Hong, also from AST, SUTD. Yeah.
right, thanks so much for attending today, both here and also online. Uh, you can see from the title, last year was a very unique year. Never before, I think, humankind faced, I mean, maybe we have 100 years ago, right? Never before in our lifetime faced this new kind of challenge, both socially and also technologically. But I think fortunately, we have a lot of advances in our technology as well as design to help us to go through this phase. And one of the things that we have been trying to achieve is what will it affect the way we come together to use public spaces? How do we actually maintain the kind of safe distancing? I would say social distancing because we are still a social kind of group. But how do we maintain the kind of safety while still continue to have our activities that as much as normal, right? So that's why we are really looking into this in our studio and want to see how other ways of using perhaps sound as a way to help us to mitigate some of this issue. How do I go to the next slide? Okay, I just sorry. This one? No. Okay. Right. So as I mentioned last year, I think we have a lot of new challenges, especially in the public area. You can see this kind of measures being implemented everywhere, and this is actually quite. This is in Buona Vista, Star Vista, right? This kind of step ramp used to be a place where many people are congregated, watching performance or just hanging out. But during the time people can't really sit so close to each other. That's why I had this kind of measures. Sorry. And even in the hawker center, this is in the East Coast, the very popular hawker center. You can see the people, spreading out. Especially what as architecture, we are very interested in how space are being used and be redesigned. So this is how you see yellow tape everywhere. I call it tape architecture. There's no such word, by the way. Uh, but it's just how we rethink our spaces through very creative intervention and something as simple as using yellow tapes. But on the other hand, could that be also offering a new kind of perspective, a new opportunity by taking the advantage of less cars on the road, for example, during last time. Now I think the cars are all back. But when we have less car, it is good for environment. At the same time, perhaps they can take the advantage to widen the lane and create better public spaces for people so that people can actually be more spread out in those public areas. But on the other hand, can such balanced proximity as a concept, as a new concept, to formulate a new sustainable solution for our future city planning? So one of the idea that we had that we discussed is using soundscape. Sound, as you know, is very intangible. We hear it, we can't see, but can we use sound as a way to restructure and rethink our public space to create a new form of urban conviviality? And therefore, our studio is looking at these few things: adaptive public furniture, furniture design that can adapt to different situations. Let's say 2 years later, we are back to large scale gathering, so we can rearrange some of this furniture and adapt the situation. But as we are opening up, we can also see how different kind of furniture layout can induce different kind of public behavior. At the same time, we don't want to also get rid of public life, social life. We want to bring back public life, but in the safe manner. So how can we do it safe and sound? Pun intended. So what happened was URA at that time, we were already discussing that we want to help to see how our design can improve the Marina Central area. Have you been to Marina Central? Yeah, I see not. How many of you haven't been to Marina Center? Oh, you haven't? Are you from overseas? Yeah. But it just never happened to you that you want to visit the place. All right. Oh, actually, that's a good example. How about you? Where you from?
I'm from India.
India.
I came in 2019,
Mm.
and then in 2020 the lockdown started.
Oh,
Probably didn't get the time to go.
right. You don't get a time, you don't get a chance to go, right? And also perhaps there's not much incentive for you to go down. So some of you who've been there before, do you think that this place is something that you want to go often? No reaction means no. Well, it's been something that we have been continued to discuss with our authority URA and see how can we rejuvenate this area. And just so happened that COVID strike, and then we actually take this opportunity to say, hey, yeah, as we are rejuvenating this area, perhaps we also want to think out of the box, make it more innovative, and take this opportunity to introduce different kinds of urban planning in future, while at the same time improve the business district. So with that, we shortlist these four areas: South Beach, Suntec City. I'm sure some of you have been to Suntec City, right? Marina Square, and Millenia Walk. So the students will then choose each of these sites to introduce their intervention. So later you will hear from Inje and Nongwu to share with you their interpretation. The studio was divided into three master plan groups. Each of the group will then propose the overall master plan to how they envision Marina Center could be like in future, to have a very targeted approach and target user group as well. And then each individual student will then take one of the corner of the site to do their intervention design using soundscape and public furniture. Uh, and with that, we also introduce more ideas on how do we design with soundscape. So with that, I will hand over to Jooyoung to share more with you about soundscape.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Okay. Actually, I'm a soundscape researcher. Have you heard about the term soundscape before? No, I believe that it's quite new to you. Not familiar with the term soundscape, but have you heard about landscape? Yeah, landscape. Actually, soundscape is a kind of analogy to landscape. Okay. Then, oh, sorry. So can you imagine how the sounds like in this place? This just looking at this picture, and can you imagine how it sounds like this? Yeah, might be water sounds, might be a very quiet and calm acoustic environment, like. So actually, the soundscape is actually defined as an acoustic environment as perceived or experienced or understood by a person or people in context. It's quite difficult to understand, right? But the thing is, soundscape is not a physical acoustic environment, but is a perceived acoustic environment, like which means that it's perception of acoustic environment. Okay, this is quite different. So I will explain. So the current, the management of acoustic environment is mainly focused on the sound pressure level expressed by the dB, decibel. Have you heard about decibel, right? But then what decibel means? Do you know what the definition of decibel? No? Actually, decibel is the unit of sound energy, okay? So decibel shows the sound energy, okay? So mainly the noise control approach usually focus on reducing the sound energy, okay? But so this is the regulation of Singapore in terms of acoustic environment. So they regulate the noise level, sound energy, right? Like daytime 60 dB, this is acceptable level of traffic noise or environment noise. At night, of course, we have to sleep, so the acceptable level decibel is 55. So they just give a kind of physical guideline, okay? But there's some issues. That is actually, so this graph shows the relationship between acoustic comfort and sound pressure level, right? So this x-axis indicates the sound pressure level, which means a decibel. And this y-axis indicates acoustic comfort, okay? But as you can see, there's no such a linear relationship between sound pressure level and acoustic comfort. Why? Can you guess why? Because, sound has meaning, right? Waterfall has some meaning, natural sounds, but it has a high decibel, sound pressure level. But we perceive differently from the traffic noise at the same level, right? Good. So a current and traditional noise control approach usually focus on physical phenomenon, especially physical acoustic phenomenon. But soundscape approach mainly focus on how we perceive the sound environment. That is the difference. Okay, so we consider how we perceive the sound, how we interpret the sound of meaning, something like that. So currently there's a paradigm shift from noise control into soundscape design. And I believe that it's gonna be a global policy of urban, sound management in the future. So, which means that city planning can no longer be content with the noise control and noise abatement, but we must pay more attention to character of the acoustic atmosphere of public spaces, like urban square, pedestrian zone, and whole of the city as well, okay? Then what is the difference between noise control approach and soundscape approach? Noise control approach usually consider sound as a waste. So we usually try to reduce down the sound pressure level, dB level, something like that. But soundscape approach, we think that sound is a kind of design element. So we try to use a pleasant sound like water sounds, bird chirping sound. So sometimes we use this kind of pleasant sound to mask out the unwanted noise, like traffic noise. So I will give you, I would like to share some examples. So this is Shep Square in the Sheffield, UK. So this is the soundscape design, very famous soundscape design. So can you see this sculpture, steel sculpture? Actually, this sculpture, steel sculpture, play as a kind of sculpture as well as a play as a kind of noise barrier. Okay, like this. As you can see, there's a traffic road. So this sculpture blocked the traffic noise as a noise barrier and produce, and produce a water sound like this. So when you just listen to this traffic noise, if we add the sound to the traffic noise, then you can hear this sound. Or you can also add, bird chirping sound as well, which means that adding natural sounds can reduce the annoyance of traffic noise. Okay, that is one possible way to enhance the acoustic environment. Okay, so and also soundscape design can be a concept of soundscape design can be applied into the artwork. So I will give you an example. Okay. So I would like to share the last soundscape design example. So this is the this is called the C organ. So this is located in Zadar, Croatia. And this is the thing. Can you guess what it is? This is C organ. Okay, they made an organ. And the C wave play this music, organ music. Let's see what it is. Okay. So in this studio, we adapt the concept of soundscape. So what we did was we collect the soundscape data in the four different Marina Bay sites. So what we did is actually we measured the sound pressure level using this smartphone app. So we measured the actual the sound pressure level at each position. After that, we conducted a soundscape survey in order to identify sound sources are there and perceived acoustic quality, like whether it is pleasant or whether it is chaotic, whether it is dull or monotonous, something like that. And based on this data collection, the students proposed their soundscape design in this context. Okay, so I would like to hand over. Yeah. This. Can stop sharing.
Oh, it's
Oh, okay, good.
I need to change the. Hi, yeah, for today, I would like to present about this post-COVID Marina Center master plan that we did together as a group. Oh, yeah, I'm Nang U. I'm a graduated senior. So, yes. So I did that studio during the lockdown, slightly after the lockdown. So it's quite an interesting experience because usually in studio, you all come together in a studio setting like this. But at that time, everything was online. So you're sort of like disconnected from everyone. But by the time I hope you guys have come into architecture, I think COVID will be more or less gone soon. So you guys can experience the true studio culture, which will be quite fun. Okay, I will move on with the presentation. So with this COVID situation, there's this rising trend of declining office rental rates within Singapore, and especially in Marina Center, which is largely a office space area. You realize that a lot of the office spaces actually start to decentralize and move away from the city center. So Marina Center end up with a lot of empty office spaces that can be utilized for other users. So what we as a group propose is that we can potentially lease out these office spaces to NGOs that are located all over Singapore. So what they will help is that they will help to bring their headquarters inside the Marina Center and set up this centralization of activities and activities that can happen in the Marina Center. So this actually ties back into our studio's objective that Keng talked about to rejuvenate the Marina Center by introducing the newer demographics that are currently maybe alien to this area, such as the marginalized communities, and the activities they bring along will actually help to rejuvenate the space for the public as well. So these are the 4 public spaces that we identify as a studio. And each of them actually has a role to play to support and accommodate the different activities by the NGOs and the different demographics that they are targeting. So this will actually set up a support node within the Marina Center itself as like an inclusive and inviting space, not just for the marginalized community, but also for the public to come together. So for today, I will focus on one of the nodes, which is at South Beach, which is redesigned as an urban stage. So this is the current context of the area. So it's a very good location, very well connected, and you have very good use of the World War II Memorial and the Esplanade as well. So my design goal when approaching this project was to rejuvenate this underutilized public space by introducing new programs and activities for the marginalized communities, in particular the LGBTQ communities and the migrant workers, to provide a space for them to come together and celebrate their causes. And the space will also be redesigned to accommodate those activities that I was talking about just now. And the public can also come together and use the space as well. So this is the current state of the South Beach. And this is the new programmatic proposal that I'm proposing, and the different soundscape atmospheres that I want to achieve for the different areas. We also identified the different stakeholders that will be involved in the scheme. So for this exercise, other than proposing the physical interventions, we also want to propose the software behind the strategy by showing how the different stakeholders can come together and make the scheme work. So I will move on to the design of the space itself. So a little bit of historical context. The space actually used to be a swimming pool back in the colonial eras. And the sunken courtyard that you see is actually the swimming pool with the water drain out. And there also used to be a diving deck that was unfortunately not preserved during the redevelopment. So all these historical contexts will actually serve as inspiration for the design language that you will see throughout the space. So the intervention spans across different layers across the 3D space. The first will be what we call the future-proof public space. So this is the floor mural, the new floor mural that we apply to the sunken courtyard where it used to be a swimming pool. So it's like a tongue-in-cheek reference back to its historical meaning. What is unique about this mural is that it's designed with a 2x2 grid. So this helped to create, set up a threshold zone that you can be so that you can be at a safe distance from your neighbor. And actually, these murals also set up a convenient guideline, easy to follow guideline for the organizer to segregate the public space for public use across the different regulations. So the next layer is the public furniture. These are designed to accommodate the different uses that will occur with the activities happening there. Next is the viewing deck. This is almost like a 1:1 recreation of the diving deck you saw just now, but it is now reinterpreted as a viewing deck that you can stand on and look into the sunken courtyard. The stairs also have to connect from the upper platform to the lower platform. The last layer is the acoustic reflectors. And to provide the good acoustic condition within the stage, a few different profiles are tested to find out the appropriate shape of the acoustic shell. And through ray tracing of the sound wave, we can actually work out the optimal profile that it has to be to improve the acoustic condition within a stage. So what this will help is to make the space suitable as a proper stage to host events and activities. So these are the different layers that I brought you through just now. Next, I will move on to the activities that I'm bringing in to the urban stage. So this is the redesigned South Beach. And as you can see, different activities can happen according to be it a normal setting or event setting. So during a normal daytime, maybe the space can be used as a working space for the office worker, as like an outdoor working space. And also the tables can come together during an event setting to form a space for celebration and dining. The acoustic reflector and the viewing deck make it suitable as a stage condition itself, whereby celebrations and performances can take place. The activity can also spill out into the upper deck area with the water fountains and setting the stage for gatherings and celebrations. So this actually shows the atmosphere inside the urban stage during the normal setting, whereby this is used by the everyday office workers to come together and do their work. And this space can actually transform into like an event space where celebrations can take place. The event can spill out into the upper deck as well, as I talked about. So this water fountain area and the pathway were used as a tower fell during the normal setting. But during the event setting, the activity can spill out even onto the road itself to accommodate be it food trucks or activities that are coming in. So I believe a good public space is actually an adaptable one that can accommodate the different users. And the different layers of interventions that I introduced just now, they can actually come together to set a stage for different activities that can happen across time. So what this helps to do is it can inject flexibility and resiliency to the public space. So yeah, with this, I end my presentation. Now I will hand over my time to Yunjie, who will talk about her project.
Sharing. Oh, it's really shared. Okay, hi, I'm Rin Jie, and I graduated last December. Okay. My project is the Millenia Art Walk. The design is aimed to focus to bring people transiting through this space to slow down and engage with different forms of arts. The Millenia Art Walk is part of a bigger master plan that my group proposed, which is to rebrand Marina Center as a arts and culture hub. So not only is art a source of entertainment, but it also helps to strengthen ties and set us on a competitive edge globally. So even in a time that is uncertain and anxious, the arts has kind of people have engaged with it through online means and to share the music from the comforts of their home. So this shows the valuable role art play in our mental well-being. And yeah, so my group first looked at what are the existing art forms that are around the site. So these are the common ones that are in that area. Most of them are sculptures, and we find that interaction with them are often passive, such as photo taking and viewing. So what we wanted to do was to introduce small scale interaction throughout the journey for two main goals: to increase interaction with artists and art pieces, as well as to encourage the public to space out into different nodes, which is safer in this COVID context. And the strategy is to use sound as a medium to elevate this experience. So this whole journey begins from South Beach, through the Sky Park in Suntec, around that Fountain of Wealth, down to Millenia Walk and to the Broadwalk at Esplanade. So different sites have different types of art forms, and this provide distinct experiences for the visitors. So each of my group member took a site, and the one that I proposed for was for Millenia Walk. My key design is this sculpted canopy that responds directly to the site analysis that I'll be sharing next. Coming from the Suntec City, you'll arrive at this Millenia Walk, which is a transitional node that brings people from all walks to this site. There's also a fountain here that adds positive sounds to that space itself. The weaknesses includes having unprogrammed residual spaces, this central space that is not activated, and a lot of unsheltered sitting area that was not used. So with that strength and weaknesses, there are many opportunities that can help us improve this space. So the design strategy includes these 5 elements: incorporating art programs, activating the central site, providing shaded sitting area, and in terms of sound is to reduce traffic noise along this route, as well as ventilation noise around here, this area. Moving on to the design process. These are the negative noise around the site. The areas highlighted in blue are the areas where I anchor this canopy onto the ground itself. So these areas act as noise barrier to the traffic noise as well as the ventilation noise. On top of that, I will activate this central region by adding positive sounds to the space. The areas highlighted in orange are the residual space that are not used. And hence I introduce art programs to these areas as well as adding a central space. So these are the programs that I propose to the site. Coming from the Marina Center, there will be a workshop area, a space dedicated for workshop. Moving down, there's a central performance stage, ample sitting area that are sheltered. At the back, there will be an art market that is highlighted in orange. Remaining spaces highlighted in green are outdoor exhibition space where sculptures can be exhibited at. So the overall canopy design is sculpted in a way to provide good acoustic environment for the performance itself, to block off traffic noises, and to provide shaded for the whole area. And not only that, is to draw people from all walks to this central stage itself. So this is how they all come together. Noise simulations were carried out to understand the effectiveness of this acoustic shell. So these two main areas, one is at the overhead bridge. So this simulation was carried out to understand whether this acoustic shell is effective in blocking off this traffic noise. The red point is the sound source and the blue is the receiver. So without the shell, the sound pressure level is much higher than when there is the acoustic shell. So with the acoustic shell, the shell actually blocks off direct sound wave coming from the source, and hence the sound pressure level measured was minimal. Apart from that, I also looked at how does this shell affects the acoustic environment within the shell itself. So with the acoustic shell, it's actually louder, but by changing the material to something that's more sound absorbent, the sound pressure level is reduced. Next, I looked at this area. I added additional positive sound to this area. So how well does this canopy above this space perform? So likewise, the red is a person singing, so that's a sound source, and the two blue areas are the receivers. I carried out simulations. So the first iteration showed that the reverberance was very high. And so subsequent iterations, 2, 3, 4, are done to reduce this reverberance value. So number 2 is when I lift up the edges. 3 is to pull them apart, so there's a little gap in between. And 4th was to reduce the width of the ribbon. So this shows how the sound propagates from the source and how the canopy guides the sound wave towards the receiver. The change in the color of the particle shows the decreasing energy level. Okay. Apart from that, I considered other design considerations. So focusing on the central stage itself, I was looking at how the people circulate through this space. So iteration 1 shows the positioning of the anchor. It blocks the circulation path. And so by changing it, the view towards the stage is blocked. And so there were multiple iterations and to make this space a meaningful one. So this was the final iteration that I came up with. This area is where the 3 strips come together. So it provides a sheltered circulation space that links these 3 strips together. There are also spaces like this away from the main circulation. So these are places where people can go to if they want closer interaction with the performers. And when the stage is not in use, it's a convenient space for exhibition or for people resting, and they can enjoy the fountain sound at the same time. This is the view towards the stage as we walk towards the seating area. This is the view of the stage itself. So the sheltered walkway, the ramped entrance. Also designed urban furnitures that takes inspiration from this string furniture as shown on the right. So this furniture, these four of them are modular, so they can be oriented in different ways to provide different sitting height for different users. They are in multiples of 300 mm, so they can be pieced together to cater for different needs. So for example, during a pandemic, it can be placed apart or placed in a way to encourage social distancing. In the event of post-pandemic, they can be placed together to encourage interaction. So this is how the furniture looks on site. They're designed to look very lightweight, so they complement nicely with the shell itself. And this is the art market with sculptures being exhibited along the area so that people can interact with it as they walk through the space. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Prof. Jooyoung, Keng, Nao, and Yinjie for that sharing. If you guys have any questions for now, you guys can send them in through the QR code, which will be shared on screen soon. Yeah. In the meantime, we'll be preparing for the second lecture. Yeah. So you can also take this time to think of any other questions that you might have to ask.
They can see it.
You can test one too if they can hear you.
Can you guys hear me back there? I know I'm wearing a mask. Yeah. So I can just go through normally everything's set up. Okay. Just making sure it's all set up. Hello. Today. So you guys been around all day today?
Yes.
Since when? 9?
9:30.
Oh, it's like a whole day work. Sorry. I'll send you out. I'll try and be fast. My name is Kenneth Tracy. I'm an assistant professor of architecture here at SUTD. I teach courses in multidisciplinary design, prototyping. The capstone course, what's called 3007, is the introduction to design course, and different architectural studio courses. In my work with students, I do a lot of work that's very hands-on, and we make things to sort of prove points. And my research is also based around this kind of prototyping, proof of concept model for architectural research. This studio that I did in the summer was trying to take advantage of the research that I do in my lab with my researchers, and also address the problems of public space in the city, addressing the changing city based on the lack of demand potentially in the future for office space, but but also trying to keep the density of core cities. I'm going to go through some of the premise of the studio project. I'm going to show then the initial sort of idea that kind of prompted the studio, and then I'll show 3 student projects. There are many other student projects, so they are here on the web, and I'll show a URL where you all can see these studio projects later on. Also, I'll also show a QR code for the Dynamic Assemblies Lab, a lab which I am the PI of, and this is the lab where we kind of make cool stuff to prove points about architecture. So this was a bit of a difficult studio to conceptualize, partially because the idea was that students would somehow do something related to my work and my research, and look at the city and how the city in the future might be different. So the idea was to bring on some collaborators. They were Jahendra Shah, who is an associate partner at Foster & Partners, a large architecture firm that spans the globe and has a Singapore office. And he does giant mixed-use buildings, sort of like the Beach Road project that you saw just now. And Sachin Gupta, a researcher of mine who helped me with some of the technical aspects of the studio. And this is a list of the students. So this is the QR code to the website. That's the blog for the studio. So you could scan this, but you can also look at the studio blogs at the SUTD website, ASD website. And then this is the kind of group of people that work with me in my lab, just so you know. So you know if you see any work from there, it's not me doing everything myself, or most of the time not outsourcing to other people, but a group of us kind of working collaboratively. In the sort of pre-COVID days, we had some option studios where we made stuff. So this is what we called a membrane tensegrity shell. So students, along with myself, made this project in 2018. In the good old days before COVID, we could come together. We made this project and actually came together and had the project as part of the space in which we held the kind of final review. So we had the opportunity to come here and do that. So we designed this project using simulation, both simulating the environment and how it interacts with the building, and simulating the structure so we could make kind of new forms. And here you can see the studio gathering for the final review for this project. And so this is not possible during the studio. And so I was thinking about then, how do we represent the future? How do architects represent the future? It's a very fundamental problem. You always, in a way, as an architect, represent the future, right? You draw something and it's not yet made, so it is the future in a way. So in film, there are different ways of kind of representing the future. You can see this is the second Blade Runner movie, which is adapted from a book by Philip K. Dick. And it represents a sort of dystopia that seems like a pretty awful place to live, but is incredibly picturesque, right? The jacket that he's wearing, the car, the scenery is all beautiful, and at the same time depressing. And that's a little bit weird, right? That things are beautiful and depressing all the time. I don't think that's actually reality. That's a sort of a way to deal with things in science fiction. Why there's numbers on the license plate, like you would use your eyes to identify a car in 50 years, I don't know. That's kind of weird, right? And then, you know, also in science fiction, everything glows for some reason. We can make everything glow now, and I don't have any glowing clothes on, and it's 2020, right? So maybe we'll never have like glowing clothes or other things like that. And of course we can if we want to do that, and that was possible 100 years ago. So the way we represent the future then can then give us some ability to address these aesthetic sort of baggage. This is just sort of making fun of that point. So I'm not the only person to ever comment on how the future is often, you know, a cartoon. This is actually a cartoon about people making cartoons of the future, like Blade Runner, right? So in the Lego Movie 2, Emmett is kind of the only normal person. Everybody else is in a dystopia. So in the middle of COVID, the reason why I'm talking about these dystopias is a way of representing the future, because COVID, for me at that moment, on the right is my daughter in this image, is like a sort of overlay of dystopia within my reality. You know, I can't say at all that I would complain about my situation at all in my life, but you know, a lot of people have died. It's been very tough, and so at the moment you see this terrible thing happening, and it affects you in kind of strange ways, right? The future that is COVID compared to the past, which is pre-COVID, is not glowing. It's also not all that bad all the time, right? And so my daughter has to wear a mask, but the good thing is all the flowers on the street grew out because they're not cut by the LTA as much. You know what I mean? So there was just a way of kind of dealing with this situation that was not totally negative. And so I think this, for me, gave, you know, some thought to the idea that post-COVID city might have these small interventions, these ways of reconfiguring the city, rethinking the city, maybe in the way that street art reconfigures both art and the way we represent imagery in the city. So normally imagery in the city is McDonald's advertisements, you know, or signs for big buildings, right? So most of the graphics you see are sponsored by corporations or the state. So street art is a direct opposition to that as the only source of graphics in the city. So, and it can be problematic, but even in Singapore, there's an interest in street art as a sort of publicness, a public art that is taking over public space as a position for art. And so this is a project in Singapore that you guys can all go see. I think it's still around. But the idea is that street art is not in isolation, and it's something that I think hits home with people because you can imagine a sort of overlapping ownership between the artist, the public space, the person that owns the building, and the person occupying that public space at the time. And architecture, I think, can do the same thing, rather than represent the single corporation that sponsors a building. Maybe architecture could be more of something like an art installation, like a Banksy art installation, for instance. And so we took on a space, you can see right next to the Beach Road project and across the street from Suntec. So in the same area as the previous studio. And we were trying to reconsider what an office building might be. The planned office building is right here. It's a Guoco Tower. It looks like an office building. It is not. It is nicely done, but it is not questioning the premise of making a rectangular block of office real estate infrastructure. Norman Foster, who is the person that found the firm that Jahendra is working with, my collaborator, he proposed buildings early in his career that actually totally dismantled the kind of stack of an office building and imagined a kind of landscape of office rather. And then he translated that physically into form later on in his career by making kind of these interesting mixed use office buildings in different cities. This is the Gherkin in London. And so the Swiss Re Tower in London, rather. And another person that questioned this kind of premise that office buildings are these sort of stacks of chairs and the stuff you need to be an office worker was Ella Zinsky, who had this plan to make these horizontal skyscrapers. And an interesting thing about these skyscrapers was that rather than being a single like tall cylinder or rectangle that from all sides is perceptibly the same, your position relative to this building changed how its shape was, basically. So the way you perceive the shape of the building is based on your position in space, which is a bit different than most office towers and office buildings, especially considering the history of skyscrapers. So the Marina Bay Sands, for instance, would also have this effect. It is effectively a horizontal and vertical skyscraper. So when we're imagining these spaces, basically there are three aspects that we sort of looked at for in the studio. So the students made some kind of what we call a tactic, a digitally manufactured kind of unit or system that could then be used in the building to create character, to create a place. And they looked at an artwork as a reference, so they could create a type of work that had a referent to art history and that offered, like street art, something to the city. And then students also did stuff with the performance of the building through its interaction with the environment, and they also looked at social situations potentially in the configuration, the shape. And so they're trying to shape the building as a public space that is articulated to create a public place. So this first project called Reimagining CBD Public Space is by Caddy and Chong, and it had the idea to take all of this space in the city that is given to parks and park connectors, and to allow that space that's parks and park connectors to infuse into more deeply the center of the city. And so the students did these intensive mappings of public space and pedestrian activity, bicycle riding, public space, underground spaces, and then combined this idea of how things moved with how they might be, the building might be perceived and what type of intensification of space might be possible. So they looked at the sublime, which is a movement in art that looks at the kind of ruggedness and kind of vastness of normally natural space, and how they could combine that with a building in Singapore. So they looked at Bukatima Hill, the tallest hill in Singapore, and juxtaposed that with a building. And it's kind of interesting to look at, you know, this like tall natural feature relative to buildings in Singapore. And then came up with a sort of strategy to look at how activity like hiking, in this case mostly, could be juxtaposed with the kind of planning of a building almost as a hill. So this is like a diagram of a hill for exercise. And then these are all the places in the building, and the building kind of intersecting with that. And this is articulated through what we call the tactic, using software to aggregate different pieces of wood automatically in very large groups to create a sort of texture that is somewhere in between a building and a natural space. So this is their sort of mediator, and they articulate the building and create this mediator volume texture, and they wrap the kind of alternative program around that, and the other art program that's not these sort of alternative programs is office, rentable office space, to create this series of tower and horizontal volumes kind of interspersed with space that's a sort of public hiking park. And that allows for the sort of public park space to be sort of interwoven with the building. And it creates a lot of interesting juxtapositions, like a lot of things smashed together that you wouldn't normally assume in the city. So there's lots of trees and people working in offices, which is not that uncommon, but the way that the project interweaves them displaces and maybe exaggerates the quantity of that move to create green space in offices. Also, I think it's very sensitive to the views of the city relative to the massing of the street. So you can see the building and how it wraps. the sort of plaza at the entry. This is like the entry of the building, and then this is a sort of hiking trail and a sort of climbing trail. The pinnacle, there's a kind of waterfall there, and looking out back at the city. So this is creating this sort of sublime reality within the sort of infrastructure of a typical office building. So the next project also uses wood, and the elements of wood that are the sort of tactic in this one are the columns and beams that the project is made out of. And the idea is to sort of make, in this case, a sort of social platform. So rather than have the office building, which is very tall, be only platforms for office workers, this is a platform for the public as well. And they do that by mixing these events around the site with a sort of set of atrium and overlapping spaces within the office building. So they have this idea of turning spaces into places, and a place to look from, and a place to look through, and a place to look to. So just like people watching or other things like that, they imagine that if things are happening, you might want to be in a place in the building where you can publicly then look at something that's maybe happening in the city. And they looked at all the things that happen in the city and in those kind of views, and they juxtaposed that to a volume that would make sense in the context there. And this is sort of basically a big pile of those platforms interspersed with openings that view into these different event-prone areas of the city. You can see how instead of a vertical stack, you get these crisscrossing voids that allow for people to be working in their office, looking at people doing a different kind of office activity or other activity, and then looking back out into the city. To do this, they analyzed the kind of platforms and then added a set of columns. And this is a sort of set of social space conditions that they were interested in. There's a longer list of these. You can see that again on the website, but there's a kind of index of how to make certain types of social conditions within the building in a language of not just making the right platform that gives the space an opportunity, but to create certain types of space that they understood as promoting social interaction. And also, this has the ability to add more maybe variety of spaces so that you can imagine other things besides just office work happening in these spaces. Again, this is like deep in the building, looking through the building and then back out to the city. So there's a breakdown of all the pieces. There's this other sort of underlying plaza space that connects Suntec and across the street. This is the project overall. This is that kind of belly of the building again, the kind of lower dipping plaza type space they created. And from above, looking through at one of these sort of atrium funnel view cone spaces at the top during an event. And you can see the basketball court in the lower left there, where, yeah, there's a sort of sports hub. And the idea would be to bring activity juxtaposed to typical office work into the city there. So one more project. Most of the projects were, or a lot of the projects were looking at wood and how that would be a sort of tactic in this project at wind and a simulation of soft material like fabric to create a space. And so the idea was to create a hub and to make the hub an open plaza that's as basically flat and connected to the street as possible, and pretty much a void, but a void that had more breeze and had more shade than you would normally have in a public space in Singapore. So to do this, they took the space that they had and they analyzed how air moved and did a lot of site studies. So this is all different iterations of how wind moved. And they came up with a circulation kind of pattern related to getting into the building view-wise, and then they simulate a big canopy-like machine that basically is a tubular structure to allow air to be sped up into this kind of atrium volume. And the building that's very tall sponsors this open space below. And you can see at the top, the kind of solar analysis, and then this kind of hub that's created in this center. So there's a solar analysis. This is this kind of canopy without a building, and then the canopy actually resides within a building as a void. So that's basically done by having this skin set of structures hung on the inside of the building to then create this smooth air moving machine. The idea is that air will go from higher levels where it's at a higher speed and slide down into the plaza and sort of cool it off. And so these giant towers actually sponsor this big machine for making a public plaza like this, where you basically have many different kinds of events, and it's a little bit like the shopping mall atriums where they have kind of daytime Pastor Malams, or where there's Pastor Malams, other things like this. This is above in this kind of gap in between those two towers looking down. This is looking back up at the two towers from the public space. You can see the articulation. It gives a sort of character like cathedral-like, or more kind of maybe grand character to this public space. This is upstairs. There's a sort of a public space for a hotel upstairs. This is the building. And they were inspired by surrealist paintings where they had different shapes that couldn't be identified in the facade. And that's part of their inspiration for making this kind of facade that has shapes in it, but the shapes aren't identified as, say, like a window or a door, but they have an amorphous shape. So you might make of this building a different kind of thought about how, about what the shape composes. But that's the last slide for this project. Yeah, and so at the end, I just want to say that you know, I'm really impressed with the students' work, and I found it great that, given the opportunity to be sort of positive and a bit artistic with their capabilities technically, I think they were able to accomplish a lot. Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Okay. So thank you, Prof. Kenneth. I think that was a very interesting insight for students, current students, as well as potential students, into what we could possibly do in our later terms in ASD. So we'll now move on to the Q&A session. If you guys have any questions now, you can upload them, send them in through the QR code. And in the meantime, we'll just ask some questions that we already have. And while it's still fresh in our mind, let's ask Prof. Kenneth some questions first. So I think earlier on in one of your slides, you showed some Banksy works. So we have a curious student in ASD who wants to know about how you think artists can have an influence on how we design spaces, or how you can use the artists to help influence your students' designs. Yeah.
You could have a studio inspired by artists' work like I did. That would be one way, if you're a faculty, I suppose. No, I think that artists have less constraints. They can do almost anything, right, as an artist. But the thing that you have to do as an artist is articulate and justify the reason for your particular type of production and why it's worth it to have that production. I think Banksy, for instance, is very good at justifying the existence of his art, and it shows in the demand for the artwork. Yeah, I mean, I'm just inspired by that. I'm constantly inspired by kind of artworks. The other, you know, the sublime painting that was shown in Caddy and Chung Wei's project, like those paintings, I've seen them both in person. I've seen lots of images of them, and they're just fantastic. It's amazing to, you know, imagine that people just have like muddy paste that's colored, and they make this amazing, super vivid imagery that makes you feel like you're there. So I think a lot of this is like what drives architects. So I think just absorbing it and being with it. I mean, if you're an architect, it would be great, you know, to hire an artist to work with you or to do other things like this. But as a student or a young person, I would just get out and see as much as I can and absorb it, and maybe talk to artists. The artists that I've known have very precise, and that they actually are, as professionals, very diligent people. If you are a professional studio artist, actually it's very hard. Your job is very hard because it's hard to sell, you know, a painting to someone for lots of money or whatever it is. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be learned.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Do the profs in Studio 3 have anything to add on to that? If not, we can move on to another question.
Yeah, I can move on.
All right. Okay, then let's have a couple questions for Prof. Jooyoung and Keng. So we have a question about how a student noticed that you have some animations of particles representing sound, the simulations. So this student wants to know how this was done and whether it is actually an accurate representation of how sound behaves. Yeah.
We conducted the acoustic simulation using so-called pictogram acoustic that's supported in the what is it called? Grasshopper as well as Rhino. So it's a free plugin that you can use. And actually, in terms of accuracy, of course we have to validate, but we have to make sure that all simulation tool doesn't guarantee the accuracy. Accuracy is depending on the user's knowledge. So even though we use very expensive simulation tool, but we cannot guarantee the result is not perfectly, accurate. Okay. So what we have to think is using this tool, we have to anticipate. We have to we can predict what can be done after this design implementation, something like that. Okay.
All right. Is there anything to add on?
Okay, if the question is more about the animation, then the short answer is no, the animation is not accurate, because sound as a wave exists in waveform. You'll see back in science lessons, you see wave behave as like a propagation of particles. But here, sound is represented as single particles that are bouncing off, which is more of like how a light wave will behave, but not a sound wave. But it is as close to approximation as you can get as for visualization purposes, because yeah, it'll be hard to visualize the sound wave as a wavefront itself. So it is done using the particles. But the thing to take note here is this animation is mostly just for visualization purposes. The meat of the simulation is the results, the numbers that Yunjie showed in her slides. Those are the more important data, because these are the ones that will give you the numbers to make the decisions of. Yeah. So that's the answer.
All right, thank you. Okay, maybe adding on to this question, there's another question related. So someone wants to know whether this soundscape is something that the next batch will learn, and whether it's something that they can choose to focus on.
Yeah.
I don't know. If it is possible, yeah, I would like to open this kind of soundscape studio. Yeah, actually, as far as I know, this is the very first soundscape design studio in the world. Yeah, this is, I think, the first time
In the world?
Yeah, actually, soundscape is quite new field. So as far as I know, this is the first studio. Yeah, about the soundscape design. Yeah.
Well, I think I just want to add on. We are very fortunate to have Jooyoung here to actually look at it from a very expert point of view and see how soundscape can actually, contribute to our current understanding of the urban landscape as well. And I'm quite sure that there will be opportunity for the future batches, right? Either it's through elective or studios, they can learn actually more knowledge on soundscape. So,
Okay. or adding on, actually, currently last year, there's an international standard for soundscape. So, which means that sooner or later, I mean, the government also may more attention to the soundscape design and concept, not only like noise abatement or just noise control. So I think that the future of soundscape is quite promising. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Okay, so moving on, we have a question that was specifically for Prof. Kenneth. I think Studio 3 can also share. It's quite a practical question. So we were talking about how there are many beautiful designs shown by Prof. Kenneth, but this person wants to know whether people get paid for just designing the buildings, even though these buildings are not necessarily built. I think especially in the real world.
Do students get paid for designing the buildings?
Like maybe in the real world.
Absolutely not.
Yes.
Well, I had a conversation with a friend of mine, actually Jay Hendra, who co-taught the studio with me last night. Actually, we were talking about future work, and he was saying that they were paid for a project, which I probably shouldn't talk about because maybe he doesn't want me to talk about that exactly, but over $20 million for doing a series of proposals for a large building complex, not one building, but several buildings, but over $20 million for their design. So Foster and Partners, for instance, gets paid a significant amount for the design before one brick or piece of metal is wielded. The kind of formal and spatial design of buildings is one of the cornerstones of architecture generally, and it is quite competitive as a market. So it's not very easy to be the person making the money for that. But yes, like lots and lots of money are spent. For fancy buildings like Beach Road and stuff like that, sometimes the fee for the design is 20% of the cost of construction. So that's a lot. That's a lot. I mean, engineering fees are a fraction of that normally that make it safe. So the person that just articulates the design so that it can be predictably made gets paid significantly more than the people normally that make it safe, actually, in terms of structurally safe, let's say. Yeah.
Okay. Prof. Keng or Jooyoung, do you have anything to add on?
Well, unless you are looking at the architecture as a form of art, I think I'm not sure. I think Kenneth should probably know Lebbe's Wood. He made a lot of architectural impression.
Yeah.
I think he makes money off that as well.
Yeah. There is a kind of group of people that do architecture as sculpture, architecture as painting, architecture as drawings, architecture as narrative, architecture as movie. And probably one of the biggest emerging fields is now people who simply discuss through platforms like YouTube different art forms or other things that people would be interested in. So, and YouTubers make lots of money. Not all of them, but they can, So.
Yeah, as you're talking about future, right? If you're looking at AR or VR, those architecture not necessarily being built, but they're realized in the virtual world. I think those could be a future kind of industry that you might want to venture into.
Yeah. One of my early teachers was a guy named Joe Godzinski, and he was at Columbia University when I was a graduate student, and he used to teach 3D Studio Max, which is a 3D modeling software. He was very good at making beautiful things, right? He never did a building. He directed the movie I showed, Tron, for Disney. He's probably doing okay. So if you can 3D model stuff well enough, you might do better than a guy drawing houses. But I think there's the impractical side of creating things can be the thing that actually drives the economy. And the biggest example of that would be the CBD in Singapore, where many iconic buildings actually drive tourism. People would not go to the site of the MBS or to the Singapore Flyer, other things like that, with all these radically impractical structures if they were not spectacular. So
Any question from you guys?
No questions from the other side. How about this side? Okay. Let me read out two kind of related questions that I got sent. So the first one is directed towards Prof. Kenneth. In your presentation, you showcase some vivid images or drawings of the students' projects. Are they created by the students in school? And if so, which software would they use to do so? Then let me just carry on with the second related question because I think they can all be answered together. So there are many different softwares that you use for sound or wind or lighting, and will students learn how to use these in SUTE? Yeah, so this is also good for the other studio to answer. Yeah, okay, I'm gonna go first.
Yeah, our base platform, as mentioned earlier, is Rhino, and not because we all like McNeil, the software company, or because we like the buttons that Rhino has necessarily, but mostly Rhino's become popular in education, Rhinoceros 3D, because it's relatively inexpensive and lots of other plugins are added to it through Grasshopper and through other direct plugins to the Rhino interface. And so you can get a sound plugin like Jooyoung is talking about. We use different softwares for what's called CFD, computational fluid dynamics, to analyze wind or fluid motion. And there's plugins for Rhino for that. I think they used Open Foam actually to do their analysis in this. And so they use variously Open Foam and what's called Butterfly, I think, which is a plugin for Rhino. But yeah, that's the main platform, and several of them are taught in the the technology sequence in SUTD. Yeah.
All right, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think beyond the software, I mean rendering or modeling software, I think there are many other skills that you will learn in SUTD as well. Because on the other hand, we are also looking at data, how to understand data, how to make use of data and translate into design. And there are many other methods and software to learn through that as well. AI, machine learning, and so on. So I think, so let's be more open and then see what are the things that is coming up, not just now, but in the next 5 years or 10 years. It helps us to continue to learn all these techniques and translate into our new design.
All right. Okay. Let me just ask another question. So, is there a potential for any of these projects, for example, the hiking trail building, to become a reality, or maybe looking even further, just not just these studios, but SUTD studios, maybe other projects in general? Are there any chances for students' works while still in school to actually be, um,
Yeah.
yeah, become reality? Yeah.
Yeah, I can share that. Last year, I didn't manage to share this time, but the year before, actually, we ran a studio in the site is in Vietnam, and the project was funded by Capital Land. So we got the students and flew at that time pre-COVID, so we can actually fly in and out of Vietnam, and we conduct our studies. We work with Vietnam universities and design a kindergarten in the rural area. In fact, we work with the villagers very closely together with the Capital Land project team. And the design was submitted to them and it was built 4 months later. Within 4 or 5 months, the whole building was built and we flew back to help to paint the building and do the landscaping. And that was right before COVID, so we didn't manage to capture a lot of photos, but hopefully we can go back. But yes, the answer is within the time that you are in SUTD, you have a lot of opportunity to realize some of this project. In fact, not just small things, the model that you do in actual building that we actually designed, created, and managed, and it can actually get built. Many of the other intervention like done by Ken and Christine lab also translated into real life as a prototype like the one that he has shared with you earlier. So all these prototypes are being considered by many companies in Singapore to actually turn into real project as well. Ken, you want to share more?
Yeah, the tensegrity project that I showed, the one that's sort of blowing in the winds, is basically a technology. It's a proof of concept for technology that we now have a patent for, and we're starting a business this summer, and we have a grant to make a 10-meter span version of this, and we're working with NParks. So yeah, I mean, that's just directly from students. They're co-authored on the patent, co-inventors, and yeah, I mean, we're also working on a hotel in Bali, and that's separate totally from all of our teaching, but because COVID made it hard for internships in big companies, in companies outside, we actually had students helping us design a building in Bali, and as their students, they're doing their internship, and what they drew will get built. So yeah, I think there's a lot of demand for creative design. So I think getting a really ambitious project like we would project in studio to be built is kind of hard, but that's also the measure of the studio. Why would you hamper your creativity and always draw only what could through normal means be built? Like, how would you possibly imagine a future that's different if you could only design the things that have already been done? So I think that's the other side of that kind of question, is that if you're a responsible teacher telling people about how they might make something in the future, you would not settle for the stuff that's already done, right? I mean, why repeat,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Okay. So we have time for maybe 2 more questions. Let's start with one that's more related to those who are considering joining us in SUTD. So one of the questions is, are there any skills that prospective students are expected to have? If so, what are they? Yeah. Anyone want to take the question?
Maybe
What's the perspective?
could also share what are the skills that you had before you joined SUTD?
Yeah, what skills do you have before you come?
I had no skills.
No skills? No skills?
Yeah, okay. Maybe while students from the other studio prepare to join, I can share as well, because I'm entering my last year for my bachelor study here. So I think my answer is very simple. When I joined SUTD, I had basically no architectural skills. I came here with purely just the interest to learn about design and architecture. So I would really say that there's no prior skills that you're expected to have, just the openness and willingness to learn and like listen to others. Yeah, that's the other studio for the answer.
Yeah, what Joey said is correct. You don't need to have any skills. You can just come in. So when I came for the first interview at SUDD, I actually prepared some perspective sketching just for the interview itself. And then try to pass it off as like my hobby or something. But the short answer is you don't need to do that. They don't really care. They are willing to accept you as long as you show passion and willingness to learn. So yeah, so I see some of you guys are laughing, but it's okay. I mean, it's do it as for your own enjoyment. You don't have to do it just for trying to get into a school, because you will actually find if you find enjoyment in doing it, do that, because these skills will actually eventually help you when you take on architecture. But yeah, you don't have to force yourself to do it if you don't want to. You can discover your passion when you come to SUDD also. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually have some friends that went to school with me that are not particularly good at drawing, and they're some of the most successful architects I know. They just aren't that into drawing, but they do lots of other things that architects do. So their job's mostly almost like an art director. So they do sketches and things like that a little bit. They do a little bit of 3D modeling stuff, but mostly they're like an amazing connector for new ideas. I mean, they're just not that skilled at drawing. You know what I mean? So it's a bit of a myth that you have to be good at drawing, but it's not that it's not that it hurts you to be good at drawing. It's just that what you do as an architect, as an activity, is really varied, much more than drawing. I personally draw a lot. But yeah, I think I'm probably worse at hand drawing now than when I was an undergrad. actually, and I'm much better at simulation, like physics simulation now.
Okay. You guys have anything to add on? If there's nothing on, we can move on to another kind of practical question. Is it easy for SUTD graduates from ASD to get jobs? Because I heard that ASD students can pursue masters. So if they do not, will they be unable to get jobs? Like, will people even want to hire architects that do not have a master's degree? Yeah.
Is it easy to find job?
Now, no. No, as in, okay, to be honest, because of the COVID, it actually disrupt a lot of the industry, and architecture is no exception. Yeah, I think you will hear people getting retrenched, and those guys fighting for jobs with those who just graduated. So the market also depends on the economy. Whether you can pursue architecture without masters, yes, right? Yeah, I don't think maybe they were to be okay. I'm being completely frank here. Maybe they will discriminate your pay a bit because you don't have your master's paper. But I think eventually, um, you can still climb within your company, you know, wherever you work at, and try to build up the experience. And you can eventually even become a qualified practitioner, even with a degree, if I'm not wrong, as long as you can manage to clock in the certain hours that you're required to clock in, and also pass the test to become a qualified practitioner. So yeah, you can do it even with a bachelor degree.
Maybe
Yeah.
I can add on that the question also means that with the architecture degree, not just finding a job in architecture, but looking across different industry as well. Then I think the answer is yes, because at any kind of economy, they still need manpower for different kind of purposes, right? And in architecture, we are actually we are both specialists but also generalists. So we are able to adapt to different kind of industry and environment. You can go into visualization. You can go into let's say directing. You can go into entertainment industry, like Ken's friends doing movie and all that. So there are so many actually, one of my classmates is now a movie director. so I think there are many kind of options in life. It's really depend on how you want to take your knowledge and skill to the next level. Yeah.
I would say that the master's degree is a pretty good deal because it doesn't take too much time. You get a lot of work experience because there's an internship, and being your first qualification for professional licensure, it's relatively short compared to what I went through, which was like 3 years of master's and 4 years of undergrad, and a lot of other people in other countries and stuff like that. So I think it's not the fastest in the world, but it's pretty close in terms of being a qualified professional at a base education level. So it's pretty worth it. I would say the same thing. Like you can do lots of different things with the undergrad degree.
Anything else to add on, or any other burning questions? Okay, if not, we're running out of time, so we can wrap up for. Oh, yes, we have one burning question.
It's like, is there any SUTE grants or those sort of thing for those that do not exceptionally like do well for like grades but then show passion or something?
Okay, let me just repeat the question. Are there any grants or like maybe scholarships in a sense for students who want to join who may not have particularly great grades but showcase a lot of passion or good potential? Is it? Yeah.
Are you looking at scholarship, or are you looking at like bursary or any kind of grants like that?
I think, sorry,
Any?
just any kind of grants, maybe just anything that offers like financial support
Is it
in a sense.
so it's more for financial support?
Financial support, or maybe just assistance to push this student who wants to maybe go further in like her architecture career in a sense.
I think CBD actually offer quite a number of scholarship. across different pillars. And beyond that, the company also, many companies are offering their own scholarship as well, or bursary. So I think you can definitely source for all these openings. Our admission should be able to help you as well if you have this kind of needs or passion that you want to actually prove to. I think some of the our graduate actually got very good support from the company, and they continue to excel in those company after they graduate as well.
I recommend using Bright Sparks to look for scholarships and bursary opportunities, because a lot of the companies, mostly the government ones, they will list their scholarships that they provide in the portal itself. So yeah, I recommend you guys all go and sign up for that, because it's free and it's very convenient. Yeah.
Alright.
Are those able to sign up during the study, like when you're studying at GTD or something?
Oh, are students able to apply for these things while they're still in the middle of their undergraduate studies? Yes. Okay. I think with that we have to wrap up. So if any of you still have questions, there are a few platforms that you can ask. So if you want to ask maybe SCTV students about their personal experiences, what you can expect when you become an SCTV student, you can always head on to the SCTV website. We have a chat board with our actual students, so you can ask them about their questions and experiences. You can ask them your questions and ask about their experiences. Alternatively, if you have questions relating to admissions, maybe other things about scholarships, you can always email admissions. All the resources you should be able to find from the SCTV website. Yeah. Those who are with us physically, you can always ask your facilitators. Yeah. And with that, I would like to thank all of you for joining us today. And yeah, we hope to see you again tomorrow for our other lectures and panel discussions. Yeah. Thank you.